Before Trolley Square was a shopping center, before the buses and trolleys, before Trolley Square was built, there is a lost legacy. The story of Trolley Square began in a field like this in 1888. A man named Alma H. Wynn thought he had a great idea on how to get rich. Wynn, a court stenographer and member of Salt Lake City's Bohemian Club, had his eye on an empty lot between 500 and 600 South, where Trolley Square is located today. The 10-acre lot was known back then as the 10th Ward Square and was set aside in 1849, along with other public squares, to be a community gathering place. On February 15, 1888, Wynn, called a land shark or land jumper by the newspapers, took the square over, plowed the ground, and put up a sign, "This land for sale, inquire within." Other land sharks had recently taken over Capitol Hill as well. Unfortunately for Wynn's dreams of easy money, the land belonged to Salt Lake City, and Mayor Francis Armstrong was not amused. A showdown was inevitable. A massive posse was formed the next day, and after ejecting the land sharks on Capitol Hill, the mayor's posse made a beeline south to 10th Ward Square and sent Wynn's accomplices packing. The public space had been saved, but the land shark controversy was a wake-up call to the city. Something positive needed to be done with the land. Since 1856, the Utah Territorial Fair met on and off in a variety of temporary locations. Now was the time to give the Utah Fair a permanent home. On March 7th, less than a month after Wynn's failed attempts to steal the property, Salt Lake City sold the 10th Ward Square to the Desert Agriculture and Manufacturing Society, which ran the fair. A contest was held to design the new building. On May 30th, it was announced that the entry, by someone calling himself Monday, won the design contest to create the Utah Exposition Building. After a few days of suspense, Richard Kledding, one of Utah's greatest architects, revealed himself as Monday, the winning designer. Although this was early in Kledding's career, he would go on to design many of Utah's architectural icons, such as Saltaire and the Utah State Capitol Building. Construction moved forward on October 3, 1888, less than 8 months after land shark Wynn was kicked off the property. The Utah Exposition Building opened for the Utah Territorial Fair. Construction continued with the adding of monumental towers and domes in 1891. Later, a south wing was added. To get a good idea how tall the towers were for the Utah Exposition Building, all you have to do is take a look at the Trolley Square Tower. It was about the same height. In this photograph taken from Ensign Peak around 1903, you can see the grandstands and grounds behind the building. This map shows the building in place on Trolley Square. The South Tower stood right here between the Desert Edge Brewery and Pottery Barn. The main doors of the massive Utah Exposition Building once stood right here inside Pottery Barn. People would walk through them to see the most amazing things in Utah. Although the Exposition Building was built to house the fair, it was home to many community activities, events, and fundraisers. In 1893, the Ladies Literary Association held an international festival at the square to raise money for the new public library. The celebration lasted for days and raised enough funds to save the library. The Exposition Building was a center of activities during the celebration of Utah's statehood in 1896 and the 50th anniversary of the pioneers settling in the valley. It was even home once to a swearing contest. Utah's first official state fair was held here in 1899. This photograph from inside the building's south wing gives a feel for what the fairs were like. A popular attraction at the exposition grounds were balloon ascensions, such as this one by trapeze artist Professor Staley during the fair. Balloons went up, and then the balloonist became a parachutist, and he jumped and floated back down to the ground. And the balloon? Sometimes the fair would be used for Wild West shows, such as Arizona Charlie, who shot eggs that were thrown into the air.
Reach for the sky!
A Wild East show by Hassan Ben Ali and his famous Tazunan Arab troupe showed off their acrobatics. Native Americans also appeared to large crowds. In front of the Wells Fargo Bank were these huge grandstands, and one of the things people came here to watch was football. The biggest games of the 1890s were fought right here. This was the 20-yard line. On Thanksgiving Day in 1894, the University of Utah football team met here for a grudge match against their arch rival, the invincible Salt Lake High School. Earlier that year, the high school challenged the U to play a game during the fair and trounced them. This time, the university team, including their right guard, David O. McKay, who later became president of the LDS Church, were ready. A Salt Lake Tribune artist captured the action on the square. The first half ended with high school ahead, 6-0. In the second half, the university battled down the field to the 5-yard line. As the Salt Lake Tribune reported, there they summoned the last of their strength and stood up hard and strong. The men and lads piled on each other and twisted like angleworms in an old pan. By a tremendous effort, the university squeezed white-haired Hyde out from the mass like oil paint from an artist's flask for the touchdown. But missing the kick, 6-4. The U scored 2 more times and made 1 goal, winning the game 14-6. Ultimately, despite the building's grandeur, the fair had to move. There just wasn't enough room to match the new state's growing population, agriculture, and industry. In 1902, the land and buildings were sold back to Salt Lake City, and the fair moved to its current location. Mining tycoon David Keith bought the property for $45,000 with the aim of subdividing the property and building townhomes. In 1904, Richard Kledding's grand design was torn down and the bricks used in other buildings around Salt Lake. A few years later, the property was purchased by E.H. Harriman to transform the square into something completely different, and a new legacy was born with the creation of Trolley Square. Harriman was a national railroad tycoon, but decided to make Salt Lake's Utah Light and Railway streetcar system the best in the country. The crown jewels of the trolley system were the mission-style car barns. Streetcars gave way to buses after World War II, and by the 1970s, Trolley Square was an abandoned relic. In the 1970s, developer Wally Wright was inspired by Ghirardelli Square in San Francisco. He transformed Trolley Square into a unique festival marketplace with boutiques, shopping, cafes, and more. Trolley Square became everyone's favorite shopping and entertainment experience, and one of Utah's most popular tourist attractions. Over the decades, many things have changed, and Trolley Square has survived many challenges. It began in the 1800s as a public square set aside for the community, and that tradition continues. Trolley Square is still a community gathering place where people can enjoy shopping, food, and entertainment in a vibrant atmosphere that hasn't lost touch with its past. There's excitement growing as Trolley Square leverages its legacy with a new project. The Utah Exposition Building only lasted 16 years, a legacy almost forgotten. It will continue with the creation of a new mixed residential, hotel, and retail development south of Trolley Square. This development seeks to incorporate some of the design elements that Richard Kledding used for the Utah Exposition Building, tying the new buildings thematically to the hidden history of Trolley Square.